wanted to say that we've got a privilege, very rare privilege of having with us a member of the European Parliament who is Vice Chair of a special committee on artificial intelligence, which already should be very respectful title. But Ms. Miapetra
KUMPULA-NATRI,
if I properly pronounce the name, is engaged in many other things in the European Parliament, and is already for several years, from 2014, as I understand, in the European Parliament, dealing with issues related, including industry research, energy, trade, and constitutional affairs. But today we will have a possibility to discuss the issues related to sustainable growth, and especially the aspect of a Green Deal and digitalization in the EU. And as these are the most important trends in the EU policy, I think we will be privileged to hear from you your views on these issues. So without further ado, I give you a floor to make a presentation. And thank you very much for your presence.
Thank you. I'm very honored to talk to you. I saw your very high quality program, and I'm very happy to greet you as an MEP member of the European Parliament. And the introduction gave me some titles and my responsibilities, but very short, my background. I'm, since 2014, member of the European Parliament, but prior I was member of the National Parliament of Finland for 11 years. And before that, I was working for our Prime Minister, Paavo Lipponen, for almost 3 years as special advisor, especially links to the National Parliament and Finnish issues. But my hobby has been, since the beginning of the Finnish membership in the European Union issues, I was active in the European movement. I was Secretary General of the youth structure, and then also a chair of the European movement for a long. So from there also I had, since my student times, friends and connections with the many activists of the European movement who went to the school I'm now talking to. So I'm happy to take this about half an hour presentation from these two main topics. And as a member of the European Parliament from Finland, I still have INTA committee responsibilities for e-commerce. If WTO ever gets a deal on the e-commerce issues, I'm then the rapporteur for the Parliament on that. But then also the trade committee and the trade policies are now in the renovation phase, kind of, that we want to have the new European trade policies also to include always the aspect of the climate, and also digital chapters are there. So this gives me a very interesting, for me, it's very interesting to see the global scale and Europe interaction with the rest of the world. And also IDA committee wants to create contacts with the other parliamentarians throughout the world. And then also there is, of course, very interesting weekend coming now, as the EU-India is coming and COVID is there. So how much everything is linked to each other. But to structurally do my presentation, I have prepared transparencies or PowerPoints. If you could, then you could maybe follow more structured my beginning, and I'm very eager to then have the talks and discussions with you. First, let me present you the trends. I see this picture is borrowed from a Finnish think tank Sitra, and it tells about the mega trends that we are seeing. The world is changing rapidly. Do we want it or do we not want it? Solutions from the beginning of 2000 are not valid anymore, and a lot happened even last winter, the COVID brought us together. The digital solutions were needed, even though in places you would not think before. And then the climate realities hit us hard, as many see the link of the climate biodiversity with even the disease. So if you take a closer look, digitalization and sustainability are providing quite many answers for these challenges. And these developments are, of course, the background for EU strategic policy framework. So even this picture is not from EU. I see very much that the trends being the very same. Even still in the middle of the pandemic, or depends where you are you in the middle or are you vaccinated? Personally, this is the picture that we first started to see, that it was the COVID, and then remember the COVID causes a recession, and economical activities were down. And it was quite clever to really understand that actually the climate change is even bigger challenge or threat, and even understanding the climate change now, the biodiversity is raising its head among the politicians too, and the message of the science should be heard in time, whether it's the extension or is it something very minuscule scale of the polluters. It's up often in the European Parliament discussions that how cautious principles should they be there, or do we have time to wait for certainty? And then, of course, a lot of political debates are then carried on. So we do not have time to wait or to let Greta Thunberg's generation to find an answer. It is now, and then also the Green Deal idea was to start seeing that it is the paradigm change that we have to do, and it is not energy sector alone that let's cut off the emissions from the energy. But this is like the scale is described here in the picture, I think, very well. Also, the first synthesis report tackling the climate and showed the other day in the seminar I was speaking about the Arctic, show us the shocking numbers that in some regions of the Arctic, the 2020, they had an increase of the average temperature of 6 degrees, and we are still trying to talk about 2 and 1.5. So the Green Deal is maybe the most important for European Union. The picture of von der Leyen, and then the 6 titles she gave in the beginning for this term, the challenges and programs that her commission will tackle are actually answers for the mega trends and challenges we do face together. And here we see that the Green Deal is very high, as well as the digital age that we have the topics for today. Economy that works for the people is also important now, as the summit in Porto, the social summit, is taking place, as well as the India, when we look stronger Europe in the world. Also to mention here, I must say that the European Parliament is also proud to have the first female commissioner chair, and then even the Sofagate in Turkey. She's having a lot of funds across political parties among women, I must say. I'm representing SND, and her background is in the Conservatives in Germany. But when she came to talk with the parliamentarians about the visit in Turkey, where she was headed to have the sofa and not the chair next to the Erdogan, so she was bravely in the plenary saying that, what if I would wear a tie? Would I then have been a seat? And then I think that is a strong message for every woman in every working place in Finland, that even the commission chair isn't necessarily given the chair she should, and that is like for the sisters in the European Union, that we need still fight for the equality. And then maybe to say that this is the European way of life, that we want to have the equality issues and that up in the agenda too. But that's not the topic of today. Even I talk a lot in the link to the digitalization, the possibilities. So the Green Deal was prepared before COVID, but it hasn't slowed down at all. And unfortunately, we do not have message from the science that now it's done. Now you could relax. And it was the case when I was elected for the first time 7 years ago in 2014. We were in the middle of the economical crisis. We were in the middle of the Euro crisis, and many thought that maybe after the election, the economy will take over and climate will diminish in the weight in the politics, but it didn't. So the climate change is there, and I think that is and to be remaining among the very core political issues, and it is actually the other policies to adapt to this idea of the climate fight. Whether it's the integration, as the European, how much federalism, how much which structures, everywhere I see that the climate responsibility it lays in our shoulders now and the years to come. So also the post-COVID times, it's when we will build back something. The Vice Chair Timmermans, in charge of the climate change, has always said since the beginning that it's not build back, it's build something new, and it's to build something sustainable. And that is very, very important to understand wherever you look at when the European Union is doing its policies. So if we compare the world we lived 10 years ago, or we compare the year before, the climate urgency is here and better and more understood among the different sectors. So the Green Deal is actually the growth strategy. It is not a strategy of the climate. It is not the strategy of environment and climate. It's actually our growth strategy. So how Europe will manage, how we will be economically competitive, how it will create new jobs, how it will show in the global contacts. So it is also the aim that we target as a union together for the systemic change, which is circular and emission-free, and really finds the answers for the climate change. And there's actually no sector you can forget it for a day or two. So this actually means also that we need to change how we live, how we produce, eat, move, live everyday lives, and profound change. And also means that we need to be able to disconnect the economic growth from the growing emission. And actually that is very important to when there comes the moment you feel desperate that can we deliver, can we do, it's always good to remind that our old policies was 2020, where was the 20% emission cuts by 2020 compared to the 1990, and we succeeded. We actually cut the emissions by 24%, not 20, so we were better than the strategy was. But then at the same time, the economy grew around 60% over the same period. So this is also the belief we wanted to continue, that we will cut the emissions even more, but we will grow at the same time. I'm familiar with the kind of slow growth movements too, but then I believe that we better not to we can do a lot of economical calculation, but the idea is that we need wealth and then we need the growth in these numbers still represents also the possibility for people to work and every family to have their income, and I compared it to this kind of growth and cutting emissions. And the previous picture was, if you were looking at the titles, they were a lot on the, you could count everything in. It is a farm to fork agriculture, it is the traffic mobility, it is the international agreements, it's the trade policy, it is the energy, but energy is not enough. Of course, we have other sectors that are not covered by energy only, and they are so important. So the climate law, the new climate law, European Parliament, Council and Commission agreed upon about 2 weeks ago. That was actually the legislative form from the strategies and ideas, that essential piece of legislation that put the new climate targets in the law, and they are binding obligations. So EU wants, and now it's in the law, that we want to be the climate neutral continent by 2050 and reduce emissions at least 55% by 2030. And that is again compared to the 1990. The climate law gives European citizens, but very much the business, the legal certainty and predictability they need to plan for their transition. And it is also included in the climate law, the carbon budget. So we know how much is left, and then the businesses can adapt to that, how much emissions are left until the carbon neutrality. And that idea is to create predictability, so much called after the modern and up-to-date investors. So given the importance of the independent scientific advice here, the independent scientific body will be set up to assess whether policies are on track and consistent, and they monitor the progress. And that was also a suggestion from the European Parliament side, and I'm happy to see that also taking place. Also, actually, the carbon budget was something that was not with the name of the carbon budget in the original Commission proposals, but now it's there as well. So I will not go through everything that Commission is now preparing, but then it's not strategies, it's not climate law, it's not 1 or 2 figures that how much we want to cut emissions, but this is now the only list of legislative actions that we wait Commission to present to the Parliament and Council in June or July. Anyway, in the summer, never bet for the week or two that it takes final decisions from inside the Commission to give. But the 5th or 55, actually it could be 57, because the climate law also, you can vary it a little bit how to count it. But anyway, it's a huge package to make sure energy regulation is set for the new climate targets. The regulation needs to be in coherence with each other, and it is a huge task. In addition, the example, the taxonomy rules for the sustainable finance needs also to follow the same principles. The taxonomy delegated act given from the Commission the other week, not long ago, also follows these legislations. So when these are updated, then also automatically they will update the delegated by the delegated version the sustainable finance rules or the taxonomy, what products, what fields are then sustainable, and that message is important for more and more private investors. If I take some figures from the discussions I had with the Finnish and actually the Nordic business people the other day, they are strongly advocating for strong ETS, but also reminding that if we have a figure that about 350 billion is needed yearly from the transition, about 80% is expected from the private side. So we really need companies and investors to take this seriously, even though we have our recovery funds or 750 billion funds where you need to have 37% for climate, or we have the new packages and regulations that push, and we try to invest also European money or national money. Public sector will not do it alone. So the private investors are there, and that's why also the taxonomy rules for sustainable investments are crucial to help guide also investors to bet a horse that is still running in 10 or 20 years, and not to put your money stranded asset for some fossil-based solutions that will not fly. So the coherent and predictability are the key, but then also, and now I'm from the S&D group, we see it more and more that the just transition, so the green fruit with the red heart is important. And I'm happy when I really talked with these biggest Nordic investors just 2 days ago that they took it up. Really, the rich business people, investors, they took it up and they understand that the systemic change is not possible only even if you have predictability, if there's not public support, if the people are not standing behind. And might be that the Trump was an example that you might ruin the long-term business strategies if you count our business strategy is about the sustainable solutions. And then we see that it has to be just, but also it has to be publicly and commonly shared goal to cut the emissions. So then the just transition is now part of the Commission programs as well. In Finland, we do have a peat, which is in our own soil, and using it. It has been a great success for having local warming systems for the houses, but then the science tells us that it is not sustainable and it is very polluting. So we didn't have any coal region that we could get just transition fund, but in Finland it is the tiny part for the European scale, but even for us it has been the support from the Just Transition Fund. But think about Poland, think about Romania, some very big coal regions that do face this paradigm change from coal industry to something new. And there we find the solidarity, the European solidarity, which was actually innovated in the ITRE committee last mandate, that even then along the ETS, there was an innovation that you also support in solidarity the regions that face this enormous challenge to do it. But I think it has worked because now we do not have that deep division in between the countries and regions. It used to be much higher if I compare the last year, last mandate and now. And that also is shown, of course, that we do have the council behind these emission cuts and neutrality targets, that 2050 and the cutting emission by 55%. So we do have Poland on board, we do have Romania on board, but of course they have needed guarantees that we will also show some solidarity and the rest of Europe has been ready to help the regions and people and industries in the coal regions to also be part of the change. So it is not possible if the people don't support it. So having the red heart for the green project is a message as well. And of course, the opportunities are there. The new green technologies already now are paving the way also for investors to see that who will be the one who invent the emission-free car motor, emission-free transport, and so on and so on. And then I see this global race is very positive race. And then it didn't take long for John Biden to sign the Paris Agreement, but then it's great that now we see that he's really serious about it, not only to sign the paper, but actually he and his ambassador Kerry, they announced right away from the beginning that this will be part of their technological strategy, industrial strategy, and they will invest to be able to export. So for Europe, it is good not to only say that we are leading alone. Now we have a competition, and that normally, according to market economy rule, paves the way for the better solutions for everyone when there is a competition. So it's actually important for Europe to see also Europe having this healthy competence there. And of course, important to have everybody on board. Paris Agreement is actually a requirement for any new trade agreement that European Parliament, but also the European Union is able to take. So this also taking US back on the multilateralism and common tables is important, but also their new climate targets that they will halve emissions compared to the 2005 level by 2030 is important. And then also that he already had this global summit and then wishes to have a common goals there. Of course, there's few words about US and their climate policies. It's no word about US without China. China has promised to be the climate neutral by 2060, which is a good news. Bad news is that they are still increasing the emissions and they are going to continue the whole decade, if not changing them. And they did not. They say that they will have the tipping point in 2030. And then we see the new carbon the new coal mines, but also the coal fabrication and plants to be installed. And they said that they will need to increase emissions until 2030 and only then go down from 30 to 2060 to the carbon neutrality. But it isn't even to the full fact. We know that companies, Chinese companies, they want to invest globally. They want to come here. They want to go everywhere. And they know that the rules are getting tougher. So they are inventing a lot. And then with their industrial strategies, there are a lot of solutions that we are depending on. And that also actually is a challenge for the next idea I'm talking about, the digitalization part. But then the clean tech market will grow enormously. Forerunners normally take the bigger part in the market if you go in time. Climate diplomacy is the opportunities to set common price, for example, for carbon. The CBAM, we call it carbon border adjustment mechanism, that we also wait from the European Commission to present. Actually, Kerry first visit to Brussels and said that they don't like it to the US. And then a couple of weeks later, he announced that Biden is interested to looking at it more closely. So it might be that even a European Union can actually promote a carbon border adjustment mechanism with the more countries alike, like-minded countries, and then we don't have to play with these customs or mechanism on the borders, but then create more global solution, which is of course also always good for the trade and openness of the economy. And then also the China is good in batteries and many critical materials innovations they've been doing. Actually, the figures I had from a few years ago, where are the biggest fleets of the electrical buses, and it is China and not any city in Europe or USA. So they are doing a lot as well for this technological side. But then let me jump for the digitalization part. I was all too long here, so I noticed my time is there, so I try to speed up. Digitalization, amount of data, European idea is that it's growing so fast that we need some traffic rules. As the traffic increased, we needed some traffic lights. And the amount of data they calculate and estimate that every 18 years it doubles. And exponential mathematics is so nice that when we are creating policy for this decade only, I looked at 2030, then looking back now here, we are now using only 5% of the data that we then have. And the idea is that we are not lagging behind on the industrial data, even if we were lagging behind of the personal data everybody insert in our social media or internet. There we were late, but then we don't want to be late in the digital era when it goes everywhere, not only the personal accounts and internet and platforms that nowadays dominate. That's fair. So European values are in the core, as there's no sector that will affect. You can change the slide. So why we do this, it is not that the European Union loves regulation so much that we want to stop the innovation that we too often hear from other continents or from business. But it is set the rules also that you are free to innovate, you know where to go, and that is the idea. So human-centric, ensuring fundamental rights, non-discriminatory, and the GDPR is there, and we are very happy about it. As having the GDPR also means that this is a famous spillover effect, Brussels effect, that also Americans want actually to protect their privacy, and then different legislation in different continents, different countries has been then done copying or having ideas of the GDPR. So human centricity and fundamental rights, when I last night had a discussion for parliamentarians, there were one from Canada, one from US, one from Greece, me, UK, Latvia, Japan. And everybody was talking about the same challenge that we face, these big tech, 5 companies, some more, causing similar problems everywhere, even giving a lot of answers to and enable us to work together like now. Democracy must have a say building up to the future, and that's why there needs to be some regulation, and even we do the regulation for Europe, the international contacts are very tight. So that was about the first point. The second is also that we do want to continue with the economy system we know, which is a Western European Western values, also about the market economy. So the market economy doesn't mean monopolies to dictate. So can we say that the market economy is still the way forward, and then we need some rules for that. And the data society, it's important to build so that it is the whole society that benefits from the transition, and it is not some dictators to take the lead, and then we kind of lose the democracy. You can use new technology, erupting these technologies, innovations and capacities the new technology do. You can do them a good way or bad way, and Europe wants to encourage innovations for the good way. Next slide. So infrastructure, skills, and data flows, and AI, then we can create the European data economy, not without one. So there is a project that we push for. If you are not connected, globally there are 4 billion people who are not connected to the internet. I'm very happy that European, the figures are higher, but we do have regions and we do have citizens that are not connected, and then that should be taken care by infrastructure, but also with the skills. So you shouldn't have minorities lagging out, keeping them out from this these possibilities. And COVID, if not anything earlier, showed us that you cannot even probably go to school or get your education if you're not connected to the digital sphere. And then data flows, AI are then bringing the last party. So it's not innovate on AI or innovate on one corner, but all these have to be brought together. So we can use the data, and the way to use the data for the new innovations, you need skills, and then so you understand this triangular depends one on other. So SMEs cannot grow, or our public sector cannot create better services on the digitalization if we don't also allow the data flows to happen. And that's what I'm now working in my legislative file. We are working on the data governance also, that how about the data flows, where they are, how they can be governed, is actually something that comes before the AI. The last mandate we talk about AI, and now we understood that AI is actually data, and it is only one way to use the data, and that the data management data has to be available interoperable data. You can then create the European single market for the data as well, and that then should take us to the leading position. globally that we do have available data, because now the GAFAM ruling power is that they do have so much data when others were lazy or were actually donating everything they had. Only the idea that I actually wanted to log in to the Wi-Fi, and can you do it with your Facebook account? And then I do. And why did I tell them my 10 years social life with all the aspects? So there is really much parliamentarians globally need to do, and then we are doing it. For example, with the AI regulation that we now the Commission now proposed and Parliament started to work with. So infrastructure, the 5G, fiber, everything there, and technological capacities is also a global fight. If you want to go deeper there, we can discuss that later. So this is also that not only words, but so much happening. Digital Service Act is about the platforms, as well as the Digital Market Act. Once you are big enough, you have responsibilities. And then the Data Governance Act is about creating new kind of data economy principles and ideas. So it is intermediary services that one can create an intermediary services for the data on health, data on forest, data on climate action, and that could then create a platform where the not physical platform, that the ecosystem that data owners, the companies, SMEs can share the data they trust, the interoperator. So then they only give the data they want to give, and there is a buyer on the other side, maybe the developer of the AI solutions, that can have masses of data, but also the donor of the data can trust the system. So the keywords are there that we create a trustworthy data market economy, where not only the private person has the privacy rights in shape, but also the companies need their data to be protected on the way that they don't lose every data if you open one digital connection, or you want to do something digital, that you lose the rest, because then often you lose too much. Amazon was a great example, that starting selling books in Amazon sounds a good idea, but later if you lose your market model totally, then you were not competitive anymore, and the platform alone did that. So AI regulation was already given, AI identity will be given later, so we can identify us more easily in this digital sphere. And the Data Act is then how the monetary, how the economy in between the actors is looked at. It sounds very, very ambitious pieces of the legislation, so I'm eager to wait how far Commission can do it. I know, for example, Business Europe started to lobby against. They say it's enough already, but then I want to see European Commission to keep them, to be brave, and then really look how the value creation in this digital change is delivered. Is it that you only can use the platform by giving 30% of any sales that you do, or is there a way that your data matters actually for the other part and the negotiation powers? Yes, it's private agreement, but then having SME negotiating with Facebook is not balanced negotiation system. And then, of course, everything needs to be done carefully, thinking of the cybersecurity threats, and then also on the infra side, the 5G toolboxes and security rollout is a global question, and then also many aspects on there. Quickly for second, yes, I took one article I wrote to Financial Times, because that all is close to my heart, is that once the data is biased, the AI doesn't solve the problems, it causes the problems. This has been, I wrote this before the Commission gave the AI proposal, and then the whole AI proposal by the Commission now is actually having these ethical principles, but also clear bans or very critical ways that how can you use remote biometric identification or face recognition and so, but then also that it's not, there is this high risk when it comes to your personal rights as a citizen, whether it's your social security payments or is it the whether you get a job or not. So where job recruitment, for example, on AI systems, it's not what Europe wants to see. And here it is also that, for example, for the jobs, for example, for the health, if you only use material from 45-year white male data, it doesn't fit for the females to be equally treated in the recruitation or even on health business. So this was my twin transition. A lot about the AI and digitalization is how to make it a green way so that it doesn't give more pressure for our emissions or energy usage, which is still not emission free. But at the same time, you know that the more difficult transition part doesn't happen without proper digital tools and analysis, and with the help of AI. My local heating company here in Helsinki on the Baltic Sea, they cut the emissions by 20%, only adding AI analysis for the future needs of the heating in the city that temperature in the winter are -20 and you really need to heat up your houses. And only having these models with the AI help could make these great efforts, and that's why we can talk about these main mega trends all the time linked to each other. Thank you. This was the picture my assistant said that and yesterday I talked with one person who came to work for the Brussels, was on the AI in the commission, and he said, oh, it's interesting to hear how the parliament works. So I want to just raise the glory of the parliamentarians and European Parliament. When you see the list of the legislative proposal, they are just commission proposals, then they really go for the parliament. We really do negotiate. We have new ideas to add on, even the structure normally remains. And then the member states do the same. And parliament really talks for the people and the Europeans, and ambition is always quite high. I understand it because I came from the national parliament and worked even for prime minister before. So when nationally you have the burden of paying the bill and having the taxes. And so I appreciate this structure. It's not perfect, but it still gives the balance, and parliament is part of the legislative processes. I would say the legislation is only ready when the trialogues in between the parliament and council are done after the commission proposals. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. I think, Jacques, do you have a connection problem?
No, I got switched off. Now it's I'm back. I'm back. Sorry. Simply my microphone was cut off for a moment. But I wanted to thank you very much for this presentation, very fascinating, and for showing your views on Green Deal, on digitalization. I think you've got a specific audience here, which are students of College of Europe, that they know very well the role of the institutions, and your mentioning of the role of a parliament, I think they are perfectly aware how important the European Parliament is in a legislative process. As always, we've got some questions from students. If there are already some, I will give the floor first to Eleonore, which is online, and two persons in a room. But would you prefer to answer question by question, or you take, let's say, 2, 3 at the same time, and then to respond to them? It depends on you, but let's maybe start with the first question and the immediate answer. So, Eleonora, please put your question.
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I was wondering, for your solution to ensure competition on digital services market, do you, for example, you think more like Commissioner Breton, who thinks that you have to do structural separation for the GAFAM? Or do you have more a position like Commissioner Vestager, who wants to imply a same level playing field among all the players on the market? Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat the beginning? I was not hearing very well.
Sorry. So my question was, how do you think about how to enhance the competition on digital market services? Would you rather think that you have to do structural separations for the GAFAM? Or do you think we should keep a same level playing field for all the players on the market?
Yeah, I talked yesterday, as I told you, with the parliamentarians from globally, and the Canadian was asking the US one to take care of the breaking up the big companies, and then the answer from the US legislation was that it may be almost impossible. But then at the moment when we do have this proposal from the Commission, Breton and Vestager together, is that we will have we will set rules for existing platform players, that when you are this big, you need to respect this and that. And when the Data Act comes, if it comes from the very strong format, it also gives rights for the smaller negotiating power when you are looking the rights of the data holders, because now it's very much only laying that it's the private agreement in between the two private actors, and even the platform being the other one. So the Data Act should then look at that when it's so unbalanced the system, that maybe some rights needs to be given on their own data, for example, and that would then mean that the platform could not take the full, like if you want to use their service for marketing, they are not then obliged to, or you are not obliged to take everything from the package, but then you only share part of the data, and that would be the idea there. But let's see, we don't have the proposal on the table yet. So I don't know actually the tool how we could make the separation, because the companies are not European. that is the first challenge as well. And at the moment then we also very much put efforts, and then the Breton was maybe the brain behind that. We will create the new, I would say that the 95% of the data which is not in the market yet. Can we create new ecosystems where we have public data, that is Open Data Directive is there, but then also the DGA, the first pillar of the legislation, gives the idea of that even those public data sets that have the third-party rights could be opened when you have the good governance and securities in place. So to create more and more data and start from the level playing field where there's nobody in the market yet dominant. And it's of course very important for our industrial basis, as Europe has strong industries in car, automotive sector and others, that we also create that it will not be the data flows from the small rivers always to the ocean of the GAFAM, but then create the ecosystem. And there the idea, so if the DSA, DMA are setting rules for mostly existing players, the DGA is to try to create an ecosystem that is competitive, and then the data holders have some sovereignty, and they can trust the sharing the data. So it is not saying anything that you have to do this way, but we try to create the possibilities, the data spaces, so that you cannot only plan it from France or for Europe, for Finland, but you plan it for the 446 million people, or the region here, almost 20% of the global markets.
Thank you very much. The next question, please.
Yes, hello. Thanks a lot for this interesting and important topic. I'm Cornelius from Germany, and I was wondering, because you said that 80% of the money needed for the transition has to come from the private markets. But we heard now in the last days, and also during a seminar with the 3 people working at the AEB, that there is not a lack of money, but rather a lack of projects, of companies that do projects in infrastructure or sustainable things. And likewise, Professor Mazzucato has also said that the issue is that companies in Europe are not innovative enough. Do you agree that this is a problem? And if yes, what can regulation, what can governments do to create incentives for private companies to start green projects? Or what have you tried, and what is the thing that works best in your opinion? Thank you.
Yes, very good question. That the figure I had was actually from a Nokia CEO, who also was the chairperson for Shell International in the board, and then really thinking that his background coming from the oil company and so, and they are now thinking of these issues that you will need to make the big transition, gives some hope. But at the same time, the lack of project or lack of money, we do see that the transition is not easy because of existing big companies, because some sectors will rise or will come bigger, and some sectors will fade. Some companies are doing the transition inside themselves, so they are like the car manufacturing. We don't see that many car manufacturers to disappear, but we see them all changing towards the electricity or other fuels, and it has not been easy. Parliament has been fighting for, there have been frauds and so on and so on. So that is maybe one way that you make the transformation inside the company, or then you have these winners and losers, and then those losers might be very effective on lobbying, or not letting the new innovations to come. This I recognize on the digital field too. If you have, and I'm sorry for some who love these companies, but from the market analysis basis, if you have big state-owned telecom company who's still using copper on the home connections to the homes, and they are not invested a lot after the 3G, they are lobbying hard, and the governments don't know what to do, because they do not let the innovative small mobile operators to come on the market, and they are fighting hard for fiber companies not to flourish, and they are doing the transition slowly. And that is the challenge when you make this transition, and then it might happen the same thing, that do we have innovative companies that do believe that they have to do the transition, or do we have innovative markets that do not protect too much these maybe big powerful companies who still are not offering the best solutions? So I understood economical student, so that's how I see it from the political side. What is the challenge? Yes, some regulations are there, for example, for the energy. We also push for the innovations, we push for the strategies, we do have the list that what is not sustainable, what is sustainable, that is one way. The taxonomy idea not to invest on the old doesn't yet solve that existing structures are not maybe fit for purpose. But then also I'm quite fan of the demand-based policies, that when you say that you have a demand for new kind of batteries, you only can sell the batteries that are recyclable and not recyclable, so that you break the old one, but then they are from the very design phase, that everything needs to be designed to be recyclable. So the demand policies might be one way also, that we have tried also for the blending of the better fuels, and we have tried it also on the car models, that what is expected, and if not fulfilled, then they have to kind of pay the bills not fulfilling the criteria set by politicians.
Thank you for that, but we've got more questions. So next one, yes, please.
Yeah, my name is Astin, and I have a question. Thanks first for this inspiring presentation on this green and digital transition. What would be interesting for me is to point at a point that I was missing a bit in the presentation when it comes to the greenness of the digital transition. So are there considerations? I mean, you mentioned before that looking from 2030 back, we are only using 5% of the data now. If we have a look on what current digital infrastructure is already needing in terms of energy and producing in carbon emissions, we see that, for example, it's from 2013 to 2018, the greenhouse gas or the carbon footprint of the digital area was increasing in a way that it is now bigger than the aviation sector. So digitalization is emitting more carbon than the whole aviation sector. So are there any considerations how to deal with this? And maybe one remark, because you mentioned the taxonomy and the fact that we now know on which horse to bet. It would be also interesting for me to understand what is the Parliament thinking, or what are your views on this, on how can we reach these very ambitious climate ambitions and objectives? Because we talk about the objectives, we talk about what are the horses that are still running in 2030 or 2050, but what is often not clear is how do we feed these horses, and where should they run to reach 2030 and 50? Thank you.
Yes, the first part I didn't, I was not able to include everything, but the data strategy I wrote on behalf of the Parliament, we had whole 1-2 pages about the role of the green need in digital. So yes, of course, digitalization, AI, the supercomputing, high-speed computers, they are energy dependent, and in electricity they use a lot. The blockchain technology, which has very good sides, but also then that this creates an enormous need if we would replace the normal money with the kind of computing powers they need, will cause more problems. So yes, we are aware or awake on that one, and then it actually is now the small pieces everywhere, but when we look at how much it will require in different places is a good question, of course. Today we count that global ICT is about 2% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and some estimations say that by it could be 3.6. It has been like 1.6 like 15 years ago and 3.6 now. So these we see the growth, but then at the same time we see that ICT footprint might increase to 14% by 2040. So these were the figures we were playing with, and it is huge. But at the same time, I was asking the Commission, and Commission was like quite hesitant, but they have done now some studies and carried on that with the help of the ICT, we can still make big efforts on cutting the emissions. So we kind of have to accept this one, that increase in digitalization, the ICT will consume more of the electricity that it used to be. But then if we don't, then the other sectors are maybe not to do. And there we heard that it's 10 times more. So not to stop using AI because it consumes electricity, because the AI example I gave from the Helsinki heating factory, it was like 20% savings in the amount of the heat they needed to produce. But at the same time, inside the sector, you have to do. So I'm speaking about the footprint of the sector and handprint the sector can do. But then at the same time, the sector itself needs to be more having it, and even then the data amounts is everything needed. You have a scrap of the data, you have, I don't know if you have, I have many unused SIM cards. They are still connecting all the time to the mast and nobody's using them, but they are giving the burden there. So there is also something that unused data streams that in the end, they will be hundreds, thousands, and then when they be millions and hundreds of millions. So there are many ways. Also, we talk about the green programming already. That is also then that what kind of storages are needed. And storages are also requiring the energy. So the data centers are now for the biggest share, and then communication networks for the next. And there we know, for example, replacing coppers with the fiber, it is just a small part of the energy needed, the data to flow in the fibers compared to the coppers. And the data centers, normally they can be integrated to the need for heat, and then that heat can be replaced some maybe coal or heat, or for example, some more dirtier place. So you really need to integrate the smartness in the societies, and then data centers producing heat can be used to warm up the neighbor. So all that.
Thank you very much. We've got still a question from Bianca from online participation.
Hello, my name is Bianca and I am Romanian. Thank you so much for your very interesting presentation. So my question actually relates to the cohesion policy of the current programming period. We know that new eligibility criteria have been added to the cohesion policy, among which the ones related to the climate and the digital transitions. So my question is, do you think that the necessary investment in digital and green projects in the European Union's countries and regions will be at full potential given the various absorption capacities of the member states across the Union? And do you think that, for instance, upskilling the labor force in the context of the digital transition will be the perfect opportunity to improve the human capital deficiency, which also causes these absorption challenges? Thank you.
Yes, it's very different in different member states. At the moment, we are worried, all of us who work in the EU and EU matters, about the kind of populism in Finland, that we are actually looking vote by vote in the Finnish parliament whether they will approve the RRF and then the package in the Finnish parliament, because there has been so much populistic and the true Finns saying that it's not wise that we pay 6 billion and we get 2 billion. So the 2 billion in the Finnish scale means that we took extra loans by 20 billion last winter for this COVID, and now we get 2 from Europe and we pay for 6. And that has caused now the national debate that this is not wise, this effort. Whereas I see that this is an European effort and we need to do it. But at the same time, the absorption question you posed is so strange to hear it now when I'm back in Finland, that some countries are having difficulties to absorb the money, to take the money they are given. And we are struggling here to keep our nation motivated to be part of the European Union integration. That was from the political part. But then for this green and digital project, I would have, if I would stay, and maybe many in the Commission, have the European programs where we see the digitalization needs, where we see the climate needs, and where we see that we need the batteries, because 90% of the batteries we bring from Asia, and we need to create the jobs and better batteries. So why not to start it? We do have some raw materials in Europe. And then we should create a European data strategy, European battery strategy, which we have. Then we should maybe finance it. But no, what we are doing, we will have the national envelopes, and then we say for each national envelope that please do something on the climate, please do something on the digitalization, and that is not bringing the Europe to have the best it could do. And I have been strongly always advocating for the European research policies and not only to have it that every member state have this much and then they make the science, but where the best science is that we will solve the AIDS or we will solve the COVID is needed. So this European perspective has been weakened a little, which was due to the member states that they want it. They want to, I know it better. And then some challenges are global or they are European-wide, and this is not the best. But then even more closely, what we can do with the existing structure is that Europe and European Parliament also will have a minor role there, but we struggled for that, is that to look how the monies are used, and the Commission is doing the debate with the countries all the time on the planning. And then of course the criteria are there. We have this, for example, Connected European Facility. I was negotiating that program for these 7 years with the transport route, with the energy infrastructure and even digital infrastructure, because the member states not alone will take care of this capital to be connected with the other capital. They take care maybe more easily on the internal needs. So this is the good way to show that when you have European perspective, you can create something bigger that member states could alone. And now when we have these national envelopes and then the money is there, the discussions with the Commission, and then finally that they have to be approved by the Council together, and even Parliament can follow what they're doing. And there are criteria also, and the debates are now very hot when the national member states are presenting the programs. And I must say, as from this mental change that we now had after 20 years of membership, that we're first time struggling to get a European package through in the national parliament. I also want to see that monies are used well in the countries that we are paying. So at least this is important. We can show also for the net payers that they are going to be investments that are needed. The skilling is all the time challenge in Europe because it is the national education plans. We do not have many tools on the education side on the European level. But then, of course, Horizon Europe tries to also look at the possibility for the skills, and then maybe it's more that learning from each other on the skill possibilities. And funny enough, the very big skilling programs are carried on now by Google and Microsoft in many member states. Just a side note.
Thank you very much for that. If you allow, I know the time is elapsing, but if you can still stay with us a few minutes more, we've got another question from a student.
Hello, my name is Theophil. Thank you for the discussion and your time. I would have a question. You mentioned all the proposals regarding creating a European data economy. One of them is the creation for climate change mitigation of European common data spaces, and especially maybe one on climate action. I was wondering, as the Vice President of the ADA Special Committee in the Parliament, how high on your agenda is this specific data space? And also, would you be in favor, given the criticality of the data to mitigate maybe carbon leakage and so on, to introduce mandatory data access to create, for instance, AI applications that could help improve efficiency in energy usage and so on?
Thank you. Data spaces are very high in my agenda because data spaces were a very integral part of the data strategy, and I was the Parliament rapporteur for the data strategy, and we worked a lot on the ideas around the data spaces. And then we had the DGA, the Data Governance Act, which says that data spaces are going to happen, but they didn't describe them at all. So my amendments actually for this paper were to add on a chapter on data spaces. So to get more understanding that they are the tools that Commission is using, but at the moment Commission idea is that they don't know exactly what kind of data spaces will evolve. They will give the legislative proposal only on the e-health, and then the rest is more like the countries get together, the businesses come together and invent and start doing. So the tool to create the data spaces is kind of intermediators on the different sectors, and then the data space will be created. But I added some ideas that which also the industry is now having ideas, and others, that if there is no common understanding what the data space is, we have the risk of having the data space on climate, data space on the traffic, and who's guaranteeing that they will interact and the data is interoperable. So the standards and interoperability are here the key, and I really want to see the strong will and capacity for the Commission or the common nominator that we will create the data flows also in between the data spaces. And then the data access right to evaluate. Yes, I want, for example, the cloud services and these computing services transparency, that they have to give the information for the clients and then for the analysis, so that also there you know what you are buying, how much your service is using it. So I think these tools are needed, that transparency on the energy consumption is already introduced to so many refrigerators and equipments, and so why not also the digital services and some parts. I think we have to have even legislative ways to promote it. Thank you for the good question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for a very competent presentation. And it was also very interesting to see elements of a political aspect of it that you very well know. Obviously, as I could see, for example, from your slide that you have presented, the biodiversity is the biggest challenge ahead of us. However, politically, we speak a lot about climate, much less about biodiversity, whereas this obviously is a problem. So somehow politics works also on visible issues, or on issues that are well in public life, but much less on that. You know, there is a rapidity of change, and obviously EU is trying to regulate things which are rapidly changing. I still got a nostalgia for Nokia, especially that I had a telephone of Nokia in the time that a friend of mine, Beli Sundberg, was involved in Nokia very strongly. And everything is gone. So you've got big companies, European big companies that have been here, but they have disappeared. On digital issues, you've got plenty of big companies, but they're not so much European. And I think you have mentioned very well that it's among other problems. On regulation, EU is obviously preparing many things on artificial intelligence or everything that relates to digital issues. And I read very often in Commission papers that it should be future-proof regulation. But whereas things are so much changing, that the future is already today, and it will be not really proof for the future. It might be a problem that the regulation will block some developments once it's being implemented after several years. And especially that you've got still movements in Europe that are sometimes against regulating internet, for example, things like parties even in Germany or Czech Republic or some other places. But saying that, I'm simply admiring that you are dealing with so complicated area, and where you have to combine your technical knowledge with economic understanding and with political work in the European Parliament. So thank you very much for this presentation. It was, I think, very much appreciated by everyone here, by students. And please be assured that you are always welcome to visit here. Maybe next time we could be able to, with a trip, to be physically in the European Parliament and to meet you over there. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really hope to visit sometimes physically. It has been very boring to do the work for the people, with only digital tools. Even I'm doing the digital.
Yeah.
Yes, I didn't mention from my background, as you mentioned, Veli Sundberg, and I'm from Finland. Nokia is of course strong in the 5G. Even Trump wanted to buy it one day because it didn't want the Huawei to come on board. And the Europeans have the two providers still for the networks, Ericsson and Nokia, in the globe. But then my political education was in the SND youth, PES and ECOSI, and when I was the vice chair, there happened to be one lady from Italy as an ordinary member of the bureau, Federica Mogherini. So I have had very nice, good times also learning my steps, and some people go faster and higher, but still we remain good friends.
Thank you very much.
Good, it was a pleasure.
Now we've got a